50-50 ball and a goalkeeper comes out and the player the offensive player trying to get to the ball doesn't see the keeper coming, and what's considered a foul?
I mean, talking to a goalkeeper, so I think we're probably always going to err on the side of goalkeeper has a little bit of the
Benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
I mean, I think 50-50 situations are always a little dicey. I mean, I think if there's like no intent for harm, like maybe you just and it doesn't result in a goal, maybe you just, the ball it's a dead ball, you put the ball on the ground. But I say probably err on the side of the goalkeeper,
right?
Biasly,
which everyone does.
Yeah.
The attacking player, of course. Cheese, you got anything to add to that?
I'm in season, so I'm going to behave with any disagreements with referees. I've had excellent refereeing so far, excellent officiating. No mistakes have been made. I have 15, 20 more games, hopefully, of excellent officiating and no arguing with the referees.
Look, I've never known you to play it safe like that.
No, I mean, I've actually had a lot of conversations with referees lately, and I'm trying to build a good rapport. I do think that we are missing out on some dialogue. The only dialogue really that's happening between refs and head coaches is during a game when emotions are running and something just happened, which when are you ever going to find something productive there? I'll give you an example. Like this past winter, my staff went to the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and we actually attended 2 referee seminars. We walked into one, and it was full. A lot of referees were there. And a lot of people were in the room, and the main guy raised his hand and he goes, "How many coaches are here?" And us and one other small group on the other side raised their hand. So it was only like maybe 10 of us tops. And there was a little chuckle going on, it's like, but they said, "Thanks for being here. We want the dialogue." And within 15 minutes, a couple of things had come up where they were saying, whatever, basically just coaches are dumb. It really we're kind of looking around hey man, we're here to work together,
bridge a gap.
But then it happened again, and we were like, let's just get out of here. So we just got up, and we were sitting in the middle too. We just got up and walked out, and you could even see some of the referees. I knew a couple of the guys. They were just like, sorry, it wasn't a good look. And then we went to the next one. It was actually the NCAA referees one, and they were so happy we were there. We were the only coaches there, and it was just the 4 of us. We were the only ones there that were coaches. The rest of them were all refs. And they asked us every single question. They came to us what do you think here? We brought up different situations. And it was so productive, so nice. It wasn't my team on the screen or anything like that. It was just, hey, this is what we think. This is what we see. And, I mean, we see eye to eye actually way more than what it seems on the field. And so I try my hardest now to give complete benefit of the doubt and, don't get mad at throw-ins where I think it's the wrong call. I'm going to save it for something super, super important,
Well, and we're kind of spoiled when we watch a big match on TV, right? There's all this replay, and they don't have that. So, I mean, how many times have you been watching a match and you're like, I never would have seen that if I didn't have replay, So
especially the offsides. Offside is borderline impossible. They did a study for the MLS refs. One of our alums is an MLS ref, and they get 98% correct. And some of the ones that they get correct, you're like, I thought that guy was offside by 3-4 yards, and you didn't raise your flag. Everybody's raising their hands and going nuts. And then they show the replay. You're like, oh, yeah, he's on. It was just the defender's running this way, forward's running this way. It's the exact same time the ball's played. And by the time your eyes adjust, there's 5 yards of movement in there. And you're like, well, yeah, there's your mistake. So, I mean, it's really difficult. I mean, I'll never be a ref. Everything in the soccer business, I will.
Yeah, that's one to avoid.
No way. There's no way I'll ever be a referee, ever. Not even little kids.
Yeah.
Itty bitty ones. I won't even do that. Parents will be getting.
It's probably worse there.
That's what I mean. Some little kid falls, little Johnny falls, and little Johnny's mom's gonna yell at me. I'm like, I want nothing to do with that.
No.
All right, we didn't come on here to talk about refereeing, and
it was all positive. Good things there. Yeah.
We've all refereed something, and it's awful. So
I get yelled at practice. My guys yell at me when I referee.
All right.
You're my players. Get out of here with this.
Yeah. All right. Um, so today we have Britta Marmon, who is an old friend, but she also has a recruiting story and a college career story and a coaching story, and now she's with the NCSA, which we're going to get into after we let her tell her recruiting story. And you're from California, right? Is that right? Yep.
Yep. Born in California.
And then you ended up in Iowa, of all places.
Yeah.
All right. So
believe me,
that happened.
Yeah. So I grew up out in California, Southern California. Played soccer, just like every other kid for as long as I can remember. And I have a lot of family in the Midwest. Both my parents grew up in the Illinois area, and so we spent a lot of time in the Midwest as kids. Wisconsin. We never spent any time in Iowa, but we were in Illinois a lot. And as I got older and was starting to think about college, which I didn't really give a ton of thought to it, to be honest. I mean, kids now are thinking about it in 8th grade. I was thinking about it like middle of the junior year, not even, I knew I didn't want to stay in California. I wanted something totally different, I didn't think it would be Iowa. I had no idea where Iowa was on the map, shamefully, like not at all.
That's the nose. The nose?
The flyover state, as they say.
Yeah.
It's the nose one. It's the state with the nose, right?
No.
Isn't it the nose?
See, I don't even know still.
Oh. There's like a little.
It's there next to like
down the middle of the like the states are shaped like a guy.
Like a guy, yeah.
Was the nose?
It's right next to Nebraska, Illinois. Whatever. It might have a nose. You're right.
I gotta look
it's a guy.
I gotta look this up.
It's probably a female.
It has the part that tells you it's a guy.
Yeah.
So my dad went to Northwestern, and every summer my sister and I would go to Northwestern soccer camp. We would visit with family. We stayed in the dorms. It was just something we loved doing. So we went there, I think my sophomore and junior year, maybe freshman, sophomore, junior year. And my junior year summer, going into my senior year, I was there, and the Iowa goalkeeping coach was my main coach for the camp. And I thought I was going to Northwestern. Like, that was my dream. Nobody told me I didn't have the grades for Northwestern. Nobody bothered to mention that part. So she invited me on a visit. I did not want to go. It was my first official visit. I did not want to go at all. I told my dad, I'm not going. I don't want to go to Iowa. I don't know where that is. Anyways, I go, right? I get to the airport. The plane has technical difficulties. It's a malfunction. I'm like, this is a sign. I'm not getting on this plane. There's no way. They reroute us through LA. We drive up there. I get on the plane. The pilot or the stewardess comes on and says, we don't have a pilot. This flight is canceled. And I'm like, all right, if this is not a sign that this is not supposed to happen, I get outside and my dad grabs my bag and he starts running down the terminal. And there's another flight that's leaving in like 10 minutes and it's first come, first serve. And I'm like running behind him, like throwing a fit. I get there, I get on the plane and I'm just like, I don't want to do this. I get to my visit late. I'm like a day late. I'm there probably less than 24 hours. But when I was there, like the moment I stepped foot on campus, I knew like that's where I was going to be. Mm-hmm. So super glad that my dad was like, you're going, So I played at Iowa. I was a goalkeeper. I have a twin sister. She played there with me as well, which was pretty cool. She's a center back. Played there for 4 years. Had a pretty good career. We were a pretty new program. Like I think we were the 5th recruiting class. So definitely had our ups and downs. They're a much more competitive program now than they were when I was there. But and then after college, I graduated. My now husband, David, who was on the podcast not that long ago, was the head strength and conditioning coach at Indiana State. And they were looking for a graduate assistant there for the women's soccer program. So I went there took that position. I was there for just over a year and a half. I knew I was going to be there for 2 years. Like I was getting my master's. And Chris Norris called David and said, hey, William & Mary is looking for an assistant. Why hasn't Britta applied? And And I wasn't looking for a job, I was just getting my master's and putting in my 2 years time. And I applied, went on an interview, with JD, and sort of one thing led to the next. And I was, we were moving out to Williamsburg, Virginia to take that position. So I was then at William and Mary, I think 2007 through 2013 was my first stint there. As JD's really only assistant at that time. We only had two. It was just one full-time position. We had a couple volunteers that would help us here and there. And then in 2013, I stepped away to start a family. I've got 2 kids, so we were kind of getting them going. And then was able to go back in 2019 with Shax and Marcia and just sort of be an assistant, but be a volunteer. And that was awesome because I was just able to be super flexible with what I was doing, and the kids came to training and I could travel. I didn't have to travel, but just really awesome year to spend with the team. And then we moved. So, we kind of got an abrupt change with a relocation down to Raleigh, North Carolina, right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit, and I had thought about getting back into coaching like down there, but it was just kind of transitioning. But we moved in December and 2019, and then the pandemic hit. So I was kind of at a standstill there, as everybody was kind of. But one of my former college teammates worked at NCSA. She's worked here for maybe 8 years, and she posted something about needing a women's soccer recruiting coach, and I was skeptical. I knew she worked there. I've never really had conversations with her about it, but I just, sort of shot her a message and just said, what is this all about? What does this entail? Like, friend to friend, like, what is this? And is it something that like you can shed a little light on? So one thing led to another. I started working at NCSA in September of 2020. So just kind of going on 3 years here this month.
Cool. All right. So we got to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So almost all the way. Like, you were in your junior year as a women's soccer player and you had not committed, which
no
is for someone who
it's foreign now. Yeah.
Yeah. Who went to a Big Ten D1 school. That's craziness, right? I mean, in today's age. So like, were there no resources to, help you through that process or, I mean, how'd that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. Like, I think I definitely look back and like, I was a good player. I think I thought people were just going to like come to me. Maybe I had that type of mentality, but honestly, I didn't know anything. My parents were very supportive, but they didn't know anything about it, and I'm sure there were some types of resources, but we didn't know about them. We didn't have them. We didn't use them, so I wrote letters. I got some letters in the mail. I played for the Slammers, who back then weren't what they are now, but was a, pretty competitive team. But I don't think I really understood like what needed to occur, and luckily, I mean, I'm very fortunate that, I had a couple opportunities in California, but that was not something I was interested in. But luckily I, just happened to be going to this camp that was a part of like kind of family tradition, and one thing led to the other. So it wasn't until my senior year that I committed, was offered and committed. So it's very late, kind of ages me a little bit, but very late in the process if you compare it to today.
Yeah. So like, kids that are in that process now and they're not committed yet going into their senior year. I mean, you probably deal with kids like that nowadays.
100%. Yeah.
And, just the emotional toll that's probably taking on them is pretty tough. I mean, how do you guide them through that? And
Yeah. So I work with a lot of seniors. the 2024 grads. And some of them, are just really late to figuring out that they want to play college soccer. Some have known all along, but just have not had a lot of success. Some of them, incurred an injury and then they're coming back. So there's a variety of reasons why they're just kind of starting to think about recruiting. The way that I approach it, and obviously like I'm one of many that work with our student athletes and are not all work with a recruiting coach, but I think the biggest thing is focusing on things that you can control, and you can't control like the timing, right? It is what it is. We're here, and so we really try to focus on, all right, we have to identify opportunity, and you have to be willing to be open to different opportunities, because a lot of kids come in, right? And you all know this, like it's D1 or nothing, right? And in your senior year, we all know the timelines for that. The probability of that happening is less. It's not impossible. I mean, there's certainly D1 schools that are looking for players in the senior year, but we really try to, and I really try to focus on, all right, what are your interests? What are your preferences, major, what are you looking for overall in your college experience? And are you open to different opportunities? Because there's a bigger probability of opportunity if you open things up by division level and size of school and, location. So we try to focus on like the controllables and sort of tether in like a realistic approach without sort of giving up like things that kids want, but yeah, we have a lot of seniors that kind of come in and they don't really know where they've gone wrong or if, what they should be doing. And so we kind of just have to counsel them on that, on sort of moving forward pretty quickly.
So real quick, just like walk us through what the process is when you deal with, NCSA and what you guys do and, what the results are from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, overarching, we're a recruiting platform. I personally work with women's soccer athletes, and I don't work with all of our athletes. We have different levels of membership, and I work with our top tier membership. So, when a student athlete enrolls and they sort of enroll in it, the membership that I work with, we start working together. I'm sort of their personal point of contact, right? We've got all these other resources for them. They have an online profile. They can add video, transcripts, all sorts of things. There's a bunch of educational workshops and recruiting classes. But they have access to me sort of one-on-one as needed, right? So we, especially for our 24s and our rising or our now juniors, like we try to get in touch with them really quickly upon enrollment so that we're having a conversation about, all right, where are things now? What has occurred before this point so that I can get a better sense of like, have they had conversations? Have they been sending emails? Like, have they done an ID camp or do they have any offers and then we're sort of quickly putting together a game plan based on sort of some of those things. Now, 9 times out of 10, when these kids enroll, I've never seen them play. Right. So it's not like I'm seeing them before they come into us. Like, so some of them come in with video and I can see their videos right away. Some have 0 video. Right. And so that's a challenge in itself because I can't really give you feedback on where you belong if I've never seen you play. So that's a big component of our platform is, we need to be able to see you play, and it can't just be 30 seconds of clips. We need to see something a little bit more. So that's kind of the relationship I have with the student athletes that I work. We have other memberships that don't involve as much direct communication with a recruiting coach, but they still have access to a bunch of resources and the platform overall. But the kids that I work with personally, I mean, some utilize me more than others, but it's that one-on-one that sort of helps them kind of just get a sense of where they are, what the reality is moving forward and kind of how we can work together to sort of put some things in place.
Jeez, what you got, man?
I've got a million questions. Okay, I'm actually really excited here. I do want to back up even further. You said you're from Southern Cal, but you also have family in Illinois or not there. And I actually have the exact same setup. My dad's side from Illinois, right outside Chicago. I feel like everything's outside Chicago.
Yeah.
And then my mom's side of the family is San Diego. I still have a lot of family in San Diego. My wife's family is from San Diego. So where in California were you?
So we were in like the Corona del Mar, Newport Beach area.
Gotcha.
In Southern California. So we went to CDM high school.
Gotcha.
Okay. So like middle between like an hour from San Diego, an hour from LA.
So do you consider yourself a San Diegan or?
I honestly don't really consider myself a Californian anymore. It's kind of strange. Like I don't identify that as home, not in a negative way, but I've spent so much time away from California that I identify the Midwest as more of sort of a familiar home area just because I have tons of family here.
Well, I asked because when I was in San Diego, we were like, no to LA.
Yeah. LA. Oh yeah. LA's a different place.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm basically from the OC, Orange County. So if you've seen any of like the shows,
sure.
That's sort of like that was where I was. And one of the reasons why I was very excited to kind of get out of there. And I mean, don't get me wrong. It was a wonderful place to grow up, but
yeah. All right. That was a little sidetrack. Sorry about that. So,
no, that's cool.
I wrote down, I have like 20 questions. So, basically when you first get started, are you starting off, is your main focus to get entire clubs or is it mainly an individual thing? I mean, what's the process?
Yeah. So we work with clubs. I don't work personally with clubs. We have like a team edition that will sort of work with clubs. So for example, like, I have a student athlete that I work with that says, hey, I've got my club director wants to, get the entire club involved. I'll pass all that information over to our sort of division who works with teams.
Sure.
So it's very much more individual. In my experience. So kids will sign up individually and then we work with them individually.
What do you think are the biggest questions that you get specifically from like a parent? What do you think?
Yeah.
Biggest obstacles or frequently asked questions?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on grad year. I mean, everybody's a little different, but like our senior parents, are there opportunities to play left? Can they play D1? Is there D1 soccer opportunities left? How are you going to promote her to college coaches? I think there is a misconception with parents that like we're kind of their agents, to a certain extent, like that we're going to place them or like find them a scholarship. And that's not what we do. I mean, we educate families on how to go about getting those opportunities, so I don't get as many direct questions about that, but I think that is sometimes an assumption of the client sometimes. And then it's just kind of like, how does all this work? What's the plan? Where do we go from here? So.
Okay. Now it's interesting. You just said that last part that you're more of just guiding them and helping them because I would totally imagine that a lot of parents are signing up assuming, well, this is going to help me get into a school. They're going to help me. They're going to push it. They're going to push it. And I mean, I've got examples of kids where I've got an email from, not necessarily from you guys, but from a database similar to you guys. And I'm like, oh, this kid's great. I love the video. And I'll reach out to the kid and he has no idea who I am. No, I never heard of my school. I'm like, what is, like, this is not right. This isn't the way it's supposed to be. I mean, how often do you write anything like that or?
So the way that we promote student athletes, it's varied. So we have systems in place where emails will go out based on the system's analytics. Like the coach, right? The coaches at different schools will plug in information, things they're looking for, states, level of play, whatever. So those in combination with like the way that we rate players, in addition to some other things that are like way beyond my scope of knowledge from a technical standpoint, we have things that shoot out to coaches. So yes, there's probably times where we shoot profiles out to coaches to say, hey, take a look at this kid. And that's more so to say this student athlete fits some of the things that you've indicated you're looking for. It doesn't necessarily mean this kid's really interested in that sort of space. And then for like the student athletes that I work with personally, I mean, I think a lot of people assume that like I know where they want to go, right? Like, you know, why aren't you sending her profile to D1 schools? And it's like, well, we've not had a conversation. So let's have a conversation and talk a little bit about where your interest really is, because I'm not going to reach out to a coach that and not know if that's a school you're interested in or not. So we try to have a conversation around, all right, what schools are you looking at? And then I'll personally reach out to those coaches and just say, hey, you know, XYZ student athlete is interested. She's been to camp. She hasn't really gotten much feedback. Anything that you could provide would be really helpful in just helping her sort of navigate what schools to be really looking at. So we definitely help guide them, like we give them the tools that they need to reach out on their own. But we also sort of supplement that with reaching out to coaches personally. I mean, I don't know every coach in college soccer, but having been coaching, and our whole staff has been coaching for quite some time, we know certain coaches will reach out and talk to them and sort of ask them questions. But I mean, like, my job isn't to call a coach and ask him how much money he has left for a student athlete, right? I mean, those types of conversations are being had between the student athlete and the coaching staff.
So the overwhelming majority of your kids, though, don't fall into the going to get money category. And the overwhelming majority of your kids, I say that as an assumption, because the overwhelming majority of kids in general don't fall into that category.
Yeah. And I think that is also a misconception. I don't think families really honestly understand,
right?
You know, like, we talk a lot about that, because I get a lot of parents that say, like, well, you know, she's really looking for a scholarship. And I'm like, well, then she's looking at the wrong schools, you know, because I think they don't understand that there's not just an unlimited amount of funds for kids to get scholarships from an athletic standpoint, you know? So that's something we talk a lot about, you know, because you'll have a kid looking at a school and it's $70,000 a year, right? And I'm like, do you understand that the tuition is $70,000 a year?
Right.
If you do, fine, great. You know, I'm not going to assume that that's not something you've thought about, but like, let's talk about that. What's the plan? Like, we can't assume that you're going to get a scholarship to go play there. So what's the plan in place, you know, from a financial standpoint? Is that something that, you know, you've given some thought to? So there's a lot of things that I don't think, they don't know what they don't know. So that's kind of where we come in to try and help them, like, navigate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's kind of the sad part. And this is why, you know, Sky and I have had a million of these conversations dating back to when I was talking to Augie. And I mean, when I do any of these college talks, or if I'm ever speaking to a group of kids in general, I always ask the first question. You know, I did it with Scott. You know, I'll do the first Q&A question, even though the Q&A, the Q is supposed to be coming from the audience. I'm going to start off from the coaches. And my first question is always, have you had the conversation with your families about how you're going to pay for school? Mm-hmm. And I've never had more than like 20, 30% of the hands raised. And this is even with a room full of seniors. You know, in February, I'm like, how do you not have this conversation already? And it's because of what you're talking about. They're all like, well, I was thinking scholarship. It's like,
I'm going to get a scholarship. Yeah.
I mean, not only are you way out of the realm of getting a soccer or whatever sport scholarship, you're actually now too late for all the other scholarships that you've been looking up online. I mean, I forget what the WNL coach said, but there's billions of dollars a year not being used in scholarship money that kids are just like, they just don't do the research. And you know, it's interesting that there is a need for your business, because these kids can do all of this research on their own and they're not doing any of it. I mean, they don't even know how much they can afford for school. And it's really a frustrating thing when you get a kid in your office and you're talking about stuff and you're like, CNU is a terrible fit for you based off of what you're looking at. Why are you here? You know, it just like blows my mind. And you know, I like the one thing that you did say. You called it controllables. I called it. I always talk about the same thing. Like, what's guaranteed at that school? And I know guaranteed is not the best word. Probably controllable is a better word. But looking at the academics, you know, the food, the location, you know, the classroom size, the dorms, you know, those are things that, well, you're going to know the answer to that. The soccer, you don't quite know the answer to, and well, neither does that coach probably, because they haven't seen you play, or It's just the 3-minute video that NCSA sent. And so,
Yeah.
I love that. I wish that more kids would come to you with most of that in mind and then start the process. I mean, it's too bad that most of them how many are like complete blank slates when they come to you and you're like starting the whole process with them?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, obviously, like some are farther along than others, and they want to just add like a supplement to what they've already done. Some are really, really starting super green from scratch. And so you get a really mixed bag, which makes it interesting, because I'm not having the same conversations necessarily with every family. I'm having a lot of the same conversations, but I mean, I think the one thing I've noticed a lot recently, because I think, and I understand it to a certain extent. I mean, I have a lot of coaching friends that kind of say, the players that you all have at NCSA are not to my standard. They're not high level enough, and I think, there's probably student athletes. There's always going to be student athletes that don't fit certain needs or wants. But we're seeing a lot of really, really high level players that I work with and that sort of overall we're working with that just don't have resources within maybe their ECNL club or their GA club that they don't know, like they don't, and that's not necessarily a knock on their coach or their teams, but like those coaches and teams are super busy with a million other things. So they don't have a recruiting resource. They don't know, how to do this or how to do that. So they utilize our services. And I'm biased because obviously I work with student athletes personally. I think that is obviously a really good resource because I've sort of been in the shoes of the coaches that they're trying to talk to. And, I think they can bounce ideas off of me and I can say, that's not what we want to be doing, or yes, let's do that. So a little bit of a tangent there. I don't really know why I got into that, but I mean, it's a mixed bag for sure. And not all kids want to go D1. We've got a ton of kids that are just like, I want a small D3 school on the East Coast. This is my major. How do I get exposure to those coaches? Like, what's their timeline? What do I need to be doing? So, the platform allows for a lot of different sort of opportunities.
Well, that's where I think you guys are critical. I mean, like here in Virginia, we're saturated. There's good schools D1, good schools D3, good clubs, big environments, big cities, big showcases close by. I mean, if I get an email from a kid that's an ECNL kid in the state of Virginia, I don't need you guys in this at all. Like, I'm going to watch the kid. But if a kid from Iowa or, some state that I'm like, when am I going to ever see this kid? I'm spending a lot of time like, all right, I'm watching this video. I'm definitely going to do some research here, especially if the kid, this is one of the things I love about you guys is you can just add your stuff to their already email. Like they're going to send me a Gmail email or a Yahoo email that I can respond to, and it's directly back and forth. I don't have to sign in to NCSA and go through the process with that. I'm like, oh man, I forgot my password. I'm deleting everything. I can just click on you and it pops up and there's the kid's video and a few details that I need. And maybe a coach's contact is on there. And I love that. That's one click for me and it's everything I need. I absolutely love that. And, let me ask you this. How do you guys, I know you have good coaches that are there. I actually know Brady's there,
Brady. He's great.
So how do you, what's the process for rating these guys? Like how does that work?
Yeah. So all of the athletic rating and evaluation is, we try to base it purely on what we see in video. Because that's really the only piece that we see. Obviously we take level of play into account if they're playing at a high level ECNL, on the men's side, obviously there's high level MLS Next, ECNL GA. But I have a ton of kids that are ECNL kids, but they start off, their first video is a high school video. Right. So they look great, but the level is clearly lower. So their evaluation is going to be lower in that first evaluation because we need to see them doing those things at a higher level, right? In order to say, hey, you should be looking at these schools. We need to see you playing at a higher level, right? Yeah. So it's based off video, and that's a challenge that I think some have, because a lot of teams now have VO cameras, trace cameras, huddle, there's all sorts of things, but there's a lot of kids that don't have access to that.
Right.
And, like I work with kids in all states, Hawaii, South Dakota. I mean, places where like a lot of schools are not going to be able to see you play in person. Right. And if you don't have access to video, that's a challenge. So we talk about, how to get that video and what's needed, like what coaches want to see positionally. And then once that video is submitted, that's kind of how we rate them athletically.
What do you do when a kid comes in, you get the video and you're like, man, this kid is not playing soccer, or maybe they're not very good, but they have like a 4.4.
Yeah.
They want to be an electrical engineer. Like they have something super precise that they want to study. And I mean, do you ever just step in and say, look, these are your schools to choose from? And
oh yeah,
soccer's probably not going to happen at those places.
So yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I work with a lot of really, really high achieving academic student athletes, right? I mean, women's soccer and men's soccer, but like women's soccer, there's a lot of very high academic kids. And that's a big want, is high academics. And the thing about it is a lot of high academic schools are very competitive, and very highly sought after. So if there's a student athlete that the levels are just not computing, right? This is the academic piece. Yeah, those schools are great for the academic piece, but that athletic piece is not matching up. Like we have a conversation about that, and it depends on timing, right? If it's a senior or a junior or an 8th grader or a 9th grader, I mean, you can kind of tell, right? But we start talking about, all right, listen, these are better options for soccer, right? Whether it's, hey, if you really want to go to Stanford, that's your number one choice, or you want to go to an Ivy League school, then club soccer is probably going to be a better option for you. And we can talk to you about that. We can, most people don't know that club soccer exists, and that it's an option. Or we say, all right, we're going to have, and most kids, I would say, have 2 lists. They have schools that they're definitely going to apply to. And we're talking a lot about this with seniors right now. They have schools that they're definitely applying to no matter what, right? Regardless of the soccer piece. And then they have schools that are a better fit for them athletically and offers their major. It might not be like their dream school or like the highest of academics, but right. They've sort of found a fit for the other things. And so we talk about that, right? Like you need to have a couple of different options. You need to have some schools that are more realistic athletically, and you need to have schools that you want to apply to for academics and overall college experience. But the probability of that being an option for soccer is very low at this stage based on what I'm seeing. And so we either need to see better video. And the other big thing, as you mentioned, kind of was like the exposure piece. And I don't know, maybe this is a question that I can ask you, but like, I don't know a ton of coaches that are going to make decisions purely on video, Mm-hmm. So, and I could be wrong on that, but that's one thing that like, we don't claim to, like, we talk about that, video is one piece of it. It's very important, but like coaches have to see you play in person. Like a 3-minute video is a preview. Right. But how are you going to play in front of the Ivy League schools or the Patriot League schools? Like, and you're out in California and you're not on an ECNL team. So we then talk about, you're going to have to invest in ID camps. You're going to have to sort of pick and choose those chances because, that exposure piece is really, really big. So yeah, we have that conversation, and we have to, I think some folks rely on us for just like, what's realistic, what's not. Right. Not everybody likes to hear that, but I mean, I find, and this is not a knock on college coaches, that we're having a lot of conversations with kids where I'm trying to get so much feedback to just say, hey, listen, they've told me, right? I got in touch with them. They're not looking for a player at your position in your grad year, or you were at camp. They said you did well, but they're not what you're looking for because they're not able to get that information from the coach. So like, we kind of deliver a lot of that information for them because they're just sometimes they're just chasing after coaches that are just not responding. And it's like, we have to move on. We have to search other places. We have to, identify other opportunities, to explore.
Yeah, I think that the video is great, especially the beginning. I love that there's a ranking system. I think the rankings are usually pretty good too. Like usually, maybe mine's a half a star off one way or the other
Sure.
is usually the delta. And
Yeah.
if a kid fits into a certain category and I like the video, if it's somebody that I'm going to see, I absolutely take note. But if it's something
Yeah.
like I'm not going to see a California kid or whatever, and I'm not going out there, they're not
Yeah.
coming out here, and ID camps are off the table, then my hope would be, okay, to your point, a good soccer game. Send me the whole film of that good
Yeah.
soccer game. I don't want your high school game. I want a great game. You and something that matters more than just a showcase game.
Yeah.
And hopefully I know somebody that knows somebody that can give me some
Yeah.
feedback.
Exactly.
Like there's a trust phone call that I can make to get some details. That's probably the only way I would take a kid without seeing them in person. But
Yeah.
like we had a kid from Minnesota that we really liked, and on film, awesome.
Yeah.
3-minute, 4-minute video. I'm like, this kid's great. Sent it to a few people, and good news for us is I didn't have to send him out here, or get him out here. He was playing in a big event, and so we go watch him play. And the game itself wasn't the same as the video, so there you go. There's your exact reason. I would have absolutely offered him after the video, but I'm not going to now that we've seen him live. But sometimes it's been the other way around where I've watched video and I'm like, then you go see him in person and you're like, oh wow, I can see the presence in person.
Yeah.
I can see the he's the big kid, strong, whatever, like something that maybe the film doesn't exactly.
You can't see. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to determine some things through film.
Right.
And I always tell kids because there'll be pushback sometimes on the evaluation that I give a student athlete versus where they think they should be. And I'm totally fine with that. And it's all subjective, right? We're all coaches. We're looking at different things. We have different things that we like versus things that we don't, whatever it is, it's a bit subjective. So I think that we try to really put that out there. Like, listen, what I'm looking for and what I see is based on my experience as a college coach and my experience as a coach, and every coach is going to maybe be looking for something a little different. So it's not to say that they're not going to see that in your film. Right. And film is not the only thing. So we really try to just use that as a tool for them to be able to get into our system and kind of see where they compare. But it's not the end all be all, just because they're rated really high doesn't mean that those coaches are going to think that, they're going to be their number one recruit. I mean, and just because they're rated a little bit lower doesn't mean that they're not going to get picked up by somebody. So, we have a lot of conversations surrounding that as well.
Well, and there's no way to sorry, Cheese.
Very good.
There's no way to measure certain attributes that, 4-minute video clip that, how did they react to a mistake and,
exactly
all those other things that go into being a competitive athlete.
Yeah, for sure.
And the overarching thing in all of this conversation is people just need to be honest with themselves and, and listen to all the feedback they're getting. Right. And then make a decision that's best for them. I mean, it's a tough process, having the kid through it. It's well, like I've told Cheese a million times. I mean, if we didn't have Cheese, I don't know what would have happened. We had somebody who was inside that kind of helped guide us through the process, which was tremendously helpful. But it sounds like you provide a bit of that, but you don't see them on a daily basis. So it's
right.
Still.
Yeah. There's definitely, listen, there's some kids that I talk to weekly, and they utilize me. They're the ones that are scheduling the calls, because they've identified a need in having hey, I got this from a coach. What does this mean? What should I be doing? I'm going to this ID camp, XYZ, right? Not everybody does that. So they're kind of using the platform in their own way. And we try to really get kids on the phone or parents on the phone as much as we can, because that's where we can sort of best help them. But you're right. We're not seeing them every day, and I'm not seeing them in person. I have a couple student athletes that I work with that are local to me. So I've gone out and watched them play in their other sport, but for the most part, for the entire part, I'm not seeing these kids in person. So,
yeah.
But are you guys having discussions or utilizing gap year or having like what's your discussions
a
there?
lot of conversations. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, since COVID, obviously, I'm sure you have kind of had the same thing, like
It's
tons and
still
tons
an
of
issue,
kids.
even for this class. They still are
Yeah.
dealing with COVID situations because I'm
Yeah.
bringing back kids for a fifth year. This is the
Mm-hmm.
last year of that, but coming up next year is the last
Yeah.
year of fifth year. So even the graduating seniors this year are dealing with COVID classes in
Yes.
all of our schools. Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of, I think it's kind of twofold. I think some just assume that that's going to put them in a better position, right? Like, I'm going to take a gap year. And sometimes we're doing that like after the class before them or behind them have already had 6 months of conversations with coaches,
right,
right? So it's like, well, the timing isn't as great, right? Because, you haven't been talking to coaches and now you're going into a gap year and there's still kids that are in the whole, train. Um, so there's that. And then there's sort of I've had an injury. When I'm back from injury, it's really, I'm not in a position where I feel like I'm going to find my fit. So I'm going to take a gap year, and sort of come back and do things a little differently once, I have that year off. But I think there is an assumption that a gap year is going to like give them back time, like give them in which I don't find is the case. I mean, I think there's definitely situations where a gap year is useful. But that's certainly something we're talking a lot about. And some of the opportunities are great. I mean, I have a lot of kids that are going to play, overseas. That's something I'm seeing a lot more now, which is really interesting, like going to play, at St. Andrews or, yeah, like a lot of that, which is great. I mean, that's a really unique opportunity. And one that honestly, like if I was getting that opportunity as a high schooler to go play overseas, like that'd be awesome, but not everybody wants to do that. But, so I think there's been I mean, obviously since COVID, there's been a lot of different angles that have come into it.
sure. I'll tell you what, putting on my dad cap right now, like let's say my son is in this process right now and money out of D1 schools off the table. It's just we're paying for college, basically where we're at now, wherever that is.
Yeah.
I tell you what, those options, the gap year and playing abroad for a year sounds so appealing to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great way to gain some perspective,
Yeah.
give these kids a whole different angle, still having the college experience as an option in their future, but to be able to, well, they're going to pick up a job. They can still take some college courses and get a head start on their 4-year college degree. Or if they're going abroad, a lot of those programs have college courses or stuff that can transfer. So they're still getting educated. They're seeing a different part of the world. They're still playing some soccer. And you know what? A lot of these kids will come out of that with like, I don't need to play.
Yeah.
Or maybe a great clubs program is way better. Or maybe I play a couple sports and I want to be an intramural kid and have a different college experience that I didn't know I needed because I was playing on an ECNL team where 10 of my guys are already committed and I felt like I had to. It's just every single one of us needs to look at this as what is right for me, my family. And if I don't know the answer today, don't make a decision then, especially not $2,000 a year.
Yeah.
Make a decision next year. Take don't even do a gap year, do a gap semester. I think that there's something there. I love it. I think it's such a great idea for a lot of kids. I see a lot of kids kind of forcing the issue or just going to plan E, plan F. And I'm like, just reset your timeline, buddy. Reset your timeline, kind of get your ducks in a row. Maybe it's not even just for the kids with like a lower GPA and they want to take some college courses at a community school and raise some money, stay at home and, get a little bit in a better situation. And, I got a 3.0. Now I can go pretty much anywhere I want. And I just think there's so many benefits to it. And I'm glad you're having those conversations. It's important.
Yeah. It's, I think junior college is something that like kids are just like, no. Right. I mean, I see it all the time on preferences, no to junior college. It's like, all right, well, let's talk about this. Why? And there's some kids that listen, we don't have to have that conversation, but if we're late to the process, scholarship is a must, right? So that means like, you need financial assistance, then why aren't we talking about junior colleges? there's stigma surrounding it, right? It's like, let's go to junior college and get courses done. You get college credits, you get, you pay a lot less. Maybe you live at home, and then you're just in a much better place to transfer out somewhere else. So I mean, I agree.
Also a year older and wiser, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of transfer out, how do you deal with kids that are in the portal or kids that reach out going into the portal?
So like our memberships are lifelong, which means if I work with a kid and I have several student athletes that I've worked with, they've committed, they committed in 21, 22, whatever. And now we get a ring, they're looking to transfer. So then we can kind of, they have access to us or they have access to me. So yes, a lot of transfer conversations. What does that entail? How do I go about getting into the transfer portal? What's my timeline look like if I want to transfer? If I want to jump in the portal in November, what do I need to be thinking about now? So we definitely are having a lot of conversations surrounding that. And we have, again, like I work with individuals, so I talk to them on the phone. We have memberships that don't have access to that. So we have classes on transferring and what that process is like and what a gap year is like and what you should be considering from a timeline standpoint. But yeah, the transfer portal is, as you know, like it has completely sort of transformed some things within from a recruiting standpoint.
Yeah, I need to work this in the conversation. It's not exactly, a logical progression from what you're just talking about. I had 3 women who transferred and now play at CNU on the podcast earlier this week. And they all transferred for different reasons. But the one that floored me was a girl who went to a D1 school that we all know, and then ended up transferring to CNU. And the reason was she didn't like their style of play, right? And, she's midfielder, started matches, like was a player on the team, like not riding the bench. And the ball was just getting played from the back to the front over her midfield. And then she admitted she screwed up because she never watched them play. Never once. Didn't go there, didn't watch a match. I mean, in this day and age, to not watch someone play a match is, it blows my mind. So, I'm sure that you are advising kids, really understand what you're looking at and, maybe walk through that process of them educating themselves. And maybe we've kind of already talked about this, but you know, I had to work in that transfer story there that just to
No, it is. I mean, I think kids watch soccer more now than they have, right? But that's one thing, if I'm working with a student athlete and they've got a list of schools, right? And they're in their junior year. Very, very little of them even ever talk about style of play. I mean, if I get a kid that comes out and they're like, this is the style of play I'm looking for, I'm like, wow, okay, let's talk more about that. It's very, very few because I just don't think kids think about that. I think they think this is a D1 program or it's a D2 program and it's high level and, I'm just going to fit in, because I want to play at that level. And we have kind of forgotten all right, and we talk about this, go watch games in the fall. We recognize you can't just jump around to every school of interest, and fly all over the place. But if you can get to local matches, regardless of whether or not you're truly interested in that school, maybe they're playing an opponent that you have interest in. Go watch them, go watch their style of play, go watch your position. How do they play? Watch the sideline interactions, watch the coaching style, get a sense of what that truly looks like, because it's not a one shoe fits all experience, from a style of play, from a game day environment. So it is something that kids just don't talk a whole lot about. I don't know if it's the same on the men's side, but on the women's side, there's not a ton of players that talk about that. And I think it's certainly something that is lost a little bit, because I think kids do get places and they're like, this is not what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So we try to talk about the things that they should be looking for outside of like the things that they've verbally told us that they're looking for, you know?
I definitely get
So
the style of play question a lot.
it's good.
Most of my recruiting calls are style of play questions.
Yeah.
Or that includes a style of play question. Yeah, I mean, we're all streaming our games. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
let's say you're in the middle of nowhere. Well, you have internet, so
Yeah.
you
You
can
can watch games
right
all
all the
week
time.
long.
Right. I mean, there are, some streams obviously better than others, but there's no reason why you can't hop online and watch a game.
Yeah.
A lot of them are on demand too. I know that, I think all of Division I games, I don't think that they block where you can't go watch it because they share. I know in Division III, we don't have a sharing requirement, like a national sharing database or whatever, which I wish we would. I wish that we had to all plug in our games and so I can go watch any D3 game.
Totally.
I have to kind of YouTube or hope that they don't have a password protection on their on demand on their site, but like almost every one of us, you could watch your game live for sure.
Yeah.
So there's no reason why a kid hasn't said, oh yeah, I've seen like 10 15 college games, multiple levels, and high D1 to middle D1 to high D3, middle D3. I mean, there's just no reason why they're not doing that.
Yeah, I mean, Cheese, you've talked about this a bunch of times, like kids, and I think that your theory is that women are way more reasonable about this. That boys, well, in general, they're way more reasonable.
There's a
right?
huge topic right here. Like the boys, maybe. Then
just that boys, whatever the hell it takes, they want to be soccer players, right? And girls are a little more contemplative about where they want to end up. They're evaluating the entire experience more than boys are, I think.
Well, it's probably why, Britta, you had said that you're not getting the style of play question from girls as much as boys.
Yeah.
The questions that I don't get from boys is, like, well, what are your dorms like? What's the food
Yeah,
like?
exactly.
I feel like they should be asking about the food because my guys they're all big.
Yeah.
But like it blows my mind that they aren't more invested into all the other things outside of the small 3 to 4 months of soccer a year that we're together. I mean, I was just telling my boys tomorrow night when we play, we would have been here for a month already. And one more month from now, that's only 2 months, we're going to be 2 weeks from postseason play.
Yeah.
That's 2.5 months. And if we get knocked out, then we're done. See you later. Like, I'll see you guys later. And that's it. What are you going to do the other 9.5 months, right?
Yeah.
We have a little small spring season. We're going to do some fitness and some weightlifting stuff. And the guys play futsal. There's obviously other things that go on. It's not just the days that they can see me, but it's what about all the other stuff? Like, you're going to be in your dorm way more than you're going to be on the soccer field. You're going to be, in the dining hall every day. What type of classroom structure are you looking for? You're going to be walking around campus. Can you see yourself walking around this campus for 4 years? And, I always say, like, what can you do? Are you going to like this place if soccer is not available to you? And I feel like a lot of kids kind of got that perspective when COVID took soccer away from them. So I saw some reality kicking in for some of the classes the last couple of years, but it blows kids' minds when because when I ask that question, I go, yeah, what if I get hurt? And I go, well, or what if I just don't play you? And most kids are like, what do you mean? I'm like, every school in the country, your club team, your high school team has a bottom of the roster. There's a bottom of every single roster that doesn't play. And some of those kids get out of it. A lot of them don't. And, what are you going to do if you're that kid? I didn't recruit a kid to, oh yeah, he'll just be on the bottom of my roster. I don't do that. Most of us don't. And so you might end up there. Are you still going to be happy there? And I think that girls can answer that question more truthfully than boys, at least in my experiences. Because they're mostly concerned with, well, my identity is the soccer field. My, what type of performance am I getting? That's all that I care about. It is shocking because I do wish that more boys would focus on all the things, the entire experience, because it's a lot of money to
throw. If you don't know anything about it other than the soccer piece. I get a lot of questions, or I get a lot of like my preference, because I always ask them like initially, like, all right, what are you looking for? Like from the beginning, like right now, even if they're a freshman, I'm like, so when you see yourself going to college, what are some things that you are visioning right now? And a lot of them will talk about level of play and if they're later in the process, they might talk about majors, but then they're kind of talking about, like team culture. You know, we talk a lot about, all right, you know, you say you want a big school, right? You know, I went to a college with 40,000 people on it. And in the middle of winter, like I either had to catch a bus to get across campus. It took, you know, a good 20 minutes, or I'd walk, you know, you walk, and it's a 30-minute walk in the snow across a river. And like, I mean, it sounds like I'm an old person when I say that, but it's like, do you envision yourself being on a big campus like that? Do you even know what that looks like? Right. So, and then sure enough, like a recent conversation I had, a kid went to Ohio State, and she was like, it was way too big, way too big for my liking. It was just overwhelming. And I'm like, you know, and yeah. So, you know, I just think there's misconceptions all around, and like we try to just really provide like some, not even, I don't know, like we're just trying to like help them understand what they really, what really will be their best fit. Cause I don't think they all realize what that is. They think it's something, you know, like I get a lot of, well, what about like the lower D1 schools, or like the lower D2 schools, you know, like, are those like within reach? And it's like, well, but like, why not explore like high level D3s, you know, or, yeah, but at the same time, like high level D3s and high level D2s and D1, they're all looking for the same type of player, you know? Yep. But it's like this, not all levels are created equal. So there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of great programs, and there's a lot of programs that are going to fall at the bottom of their respective division level. And I think just like the number in front of the division or behind the division is so important to people. And then they end up sort of getting some traction with some schools that they didn't know about or didn't think about or weren't super interested in. And they're like, wow, this has a lot to offer. You know, this is like, I felt great about this school, you know? So that's one of the goals, is to kind of just open their mind to some opportunities that they don't know are out there.
Yeah, I always, you know, make the comment about how a lot of kids are making a decision for that initial tweet or that initial Instagram post, where
totally.
I mean, there's a couple sites that I follow that are soccer sites that'll highlight college things. I'm like, oh, cool, that's a neat thing, and they'll post when a D1 kid commits. And it's super funny to me because they'll say like, Scott Cooper has just committed to play, and it'll say Division I soccer before it even says the school, and you're like, yeah, man, we all know UVA is a Division
is D1
school. Like, like it just, why did you have to emphasize that? Like, what was the point there? And you know, I've got a really good friend. He was my old English teacher actually, and he coached an awesome. He's got like national championships in club, and he told me something that just blew my mind. It was on the girls' side. He had, I think 12 girls on one team go Division I, and 9 of them transferred before their first year, like complete, like they were in the portal before their first year. And you're like, that's a terrible stat. But I asked him, like, what do you think it was? And he said, well, so many of them, like as soon as one committed, like 6 more committed immediately. And I'm like, what?
Totally.
You know, and you're like, you're making decisions for the wrong reasons. And like, you know, we talked about how expensive it is. It's like, who spends that kind of money on something that doesn't have the complete package? Like, oh, you know, like you're buying a house because of one small, like, oh, I love the garage, so I'm gonna buy this house.
You
got a hole in the side of your house, man. Like, what about the kitchen doesn't have any plumbing? You know, like, what about the other things that are also important? Now the garage is what I bought. You know? So, you know, it's sad. I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. You know, I think that this is the point. This is the whole reason why Scott and I, you know, talk about this stuff all the time. And I think that it really resonated with Scott, having Augie go through the process. And so I'm hoping that this is really, I'd love to see the portal only be filled with kids that like had to go in the portal for something completely, you know, like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Not because they made the wrong decision in the
exactly. Yeah, because I mean, kids talk about it. They're like, well, you know, if she doesn't like it, there's the transfer portal at least. And I'm like, why do you want to go through that? Transferring is so, I mean, it's not like this super easy, fluffy. I mean, it's a lot. You get rooted. And it's just, it's very, very difficult. And these are just like, they're just misunderstandings and like conceptions on what things actually are. And is there going to be a kid that maybe does really well at a D2 school that transfers to a D1? Yeah. Okay. But the majority of players are not transferring up in the portal. You know, it's either linear, like D1 players are going to other D1 schools, D3 schools, whatever. And it's tough, like just uprooting yourself after a year. That it's a lot. You know, I don't think kids think about like what you go through emotionally and physically when you're like physically moving, and so
having to build new relationships.
New relationships and new systems, new like just where is my classes and who's that teacher, and you know, like how do I get there?
Well, your timeline is so much smaller. I mean, you're talking about how often you're thinking about it as a high school kid. It's years sometimes. And if you're into the transfer portal in January of your first year, you need to make a decision like really quickly,
immediately.
I mean, we're like, I'm going to be done. I need to know by March. It's like, well, I just got in the portal January. It's like, well, you know, you ready to get your butt in here for a visit, you know, it's like, what do you want me to tell you? This, I need to know now. So, you know, you're making a quick decision, and it's sad when I go on the transfer portal. I check it every day, multiple times a day. And there are times I've seen a kid, I'm like, that's his second time I've seen this kid on the board. They're like, ugh.
Yeah.
You know, and both times were because of unhappiness, you know. Like,
yeah. I mean, fit for us, like it's so cliche because I say this on almost every call, like it's about your fit. You know, it's not about, you know, I mean, and fit might mean scholarship and division level for you, but the best fit is where you're going to like look back and say, man, I'm so glad that this was the decision I made. And so we talk about fit so much. And I think, you know, sometimes that goes in one ear and out the other. And sometimes it's like, and some we have kids that come in and they say, listen, I'm trying to find my best fit. I want to be happy in college. I want to balance. These are the things I'm looking for. And fit is really important. But I don't think that language is thought of enough, you know?
Great. That's good.
Cool. Yeah. Anything else? Cheese? You get all 20 of your questions answered?
I have one left. Has there ever been like a big disagreement on a kid? Like, do you guys share video? Like, it's not just your evaluation. Like, like if we're working together, I'll watch the video too. Like, oh, that's a 3-star kid. Like, I have 6. Like, have you ever had a big disagreement on a kid?
So we haven't, I've not had a huge disagreement, but like we definitely share. So, you know, if I'm like teetering on a kid, like I'm like here but I'm kind of thinking like, should I be here or lower or whatever? So we will shoot those out across our team of women's soccer recruiting coaches, and we bounce things off of one another. And we're usually like pretty close, but there's definitely times where, you know, again, going back to this coaching thing, like, you know, Coach Cole will see something that I am not seeing, or it's not that important to me or whatever. We haven't had a ton of like big time disagreements. I think some of the things that we run into with evaluating players is, you know, like past videos. Like we try to really focus on like their recent videos where they are right now, right? Like past videos, college coaches aren't going to go back and watch. And maybe you can answer this too. Like, do you go back and watch like old videos, or are you going to focus on like the video that's the most recent of that student athlete?
If a kid writes me, I want to know that like the one he just uploaded. That's usually the one I want to watch, right? I will go back. Like if there's a kid, if I teeter on a kid, or if I like, oh, I really like this film, and there's something just a few months ago, I'll watch that.
Yeah.
But if it's like 2 years ago, you're a whole different human being now, right?
Yeah. So no, we don't disagree. Like we really try to utilize each other's like backgrounds, you know, to say, what am I missing? Like, you know, mom and dad are really upset about the rating or about the evaluation. What am I missing on this? You know, and either somebody says, hey, you're spot on, or maybe consider this or consider that. So we utilize each other a lot for that. That's kind of a collective thing that we definitely do.
Well, wait a minute. Parents get upset, and then like they're paying you for your professional opinion, and then they get upset about your professional opinion. I mean,
that happens. Yeah, it happens. Unfortunately.
Yeah, be honest with yourself. I mean, I think that's just like the most important message is like, just be honest about all aspects of this, like your play, about where you know, what school's a good fit and all that. I mean, and listen to Britta. She knows what she's talking about. So.
Sometimes. Most of the time, let's be honest.
I mean, you did marry David. I mean, that's
questionable.
Like a call right there that you can talk about. But,
questionable decision. It was a long time ago.
Anyway, Cheese, you good? Got anything else?
Good. That was great.
Britta, anything else?
I'm good.
All right.
Glad we figured out the mic.
I'm glad it took you guys a while. Sorry for being late there.
We're not going to bring that up again. That was a host issue that I was trying to put on Britta.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. I hit stop.